I found a comment from Hugh Mackay, which he made in 2008, appealing. It was, we used to live in a society, now we live in an economy. And that is the basis of everything we've been doing in Kyoto. It started out of some interesting and strange beginnings, and I shan't go there because it'll take a little long. But the intent has been, over a period of 3 years, progressively, to build a social platform on which we can re-examine economics. And this is with the Institute of Creative Economics that is doing already some quite interesting things. When mentioned that I worked in the UN, the real work was not just to try to change an organisation. It was far more what I learned was working with people in community for 11 years before I came back to academia, or came back to retire in Australia, and I was responsible as a regional director across all Asia and the Pacific and ambassador to a few countries as well. My point is that I learned particularly the power of community. I saw inequality very strongly from where it really matters in terms of underdeveloped countries, and I use the word underdeveloped quite directly, because again, you probably know these figures, they're very familiar, but the top 0.1% of the world has 30% of the wealth, the lowest 99.1%, 19, but more importantly, almost 2.5 billion people live below $2 a day. Okay? Now what that does inside a community is extraordinary in terms of the way in which it affects everything about the people and what they do. So I want to start with perhaps a strange case in terms of where the location is, but it's from the Tibetan Plateau at the very north of India, and it's about the people of Ladakh, the Ladakh people, who are basically Tibetan. And why I want to talk about them is that they were quite happily getting along as a strong community in the 1970s. By 1990s, because of the impact of globalization, they were not anymore. They were massively unequal in ways they never were previously. That contrast matters in terms of thinking about equality and what we do about it. So if you forgive me, I'll read what I've written about this, because it's an important story. Ladakh, or Little Tibet's a remote region on the Tibetan Plateau, politically part of India, but in the mid-1970s still a community of self-supporting farmers living in small, scattered settlements in a high desert. Little had changed for many generations. Natural resources were scarce, but the people had developed a remarkably high standard of living. In traditional Ladakhi culture, basic needs like food and clothing were provided from a variety of crops and a few animals that they needed, without money, because they were given free when they needed food or clothing, yet somebody else would find a way of actually providing. Houses were built from what was there, which was mud and stone. The work did relaxed pace, and even did nothing for about 4 months of the year, in which case they did lots of craft and other things. A filmmaker who now lives in Australia, Helena Norberg Hodge, visited Ladakh in 1975, and that's what she found. She was being shown around one of the villages, and she asked her guide, Siwang, where the poor people lived. And the man she was with looked confused, and then finally said, we don't have any poor people. They simply weren't there until all classified or even thought about. But then the Indian government, in their wisdom, decided to open up the region to development, to connect with India and the global economy, all for the good of the Ladakhis, except they weren't asked. 20 years later, just 20 years, this is what it looked like. Visions of global consumerism and value had taken over. Food was now imported from the Indian plains, while local farmers who had previously grown a variety of crops, kept a few animals for self-sufficiency, were now encouraged to grow cash crops. Thus were dependent on huge transportation networks, oil prices and fluctuations in international finance. Building traditions gave way to modern methods and materials like concrete and steel and plastic. Under command now of the global economy, the Ladakhis needed money. Previously virtually irrelevant, they needed it to compete for the scarce imported staple food supplies and building materials. The tourists came, and they showed the Ladakhis what they should aspire to. Clothes particularly, which previously didn't matter, mattered a great deal, in particular for the women who could see status in this. And the people started to feel poor. More importantly, the local economies were crumbling because they were overwhelmed by the external globalism. The community-based sense of identity was being replaced by money-led symbols of individual worth. The women, previously strong and outgoing, were now becoming unsure, particularly about their appearance and being modern. And a particular example of this was when Norborg Hodge went back to the village in the 1990s, and the people that she knew very well before, were so embarrassed to serve her as a valued guest with the roasted barley ngumph, which was the local traditional food, that they had to go and get enough cash to go and purchase some instant noodles. And this represented the transformation by the intrusion of globalization of this village. And I use this because the Laraki is a prison, not just for them, but of the development life that we have also been through in the last 3 centuries, except it's condensed. We've just had a lot more time to progressively adjust. The dynamics, however, of what the economy does to the equality within the society, however, are very similar indeed. What we've been doing in Kyoto, as we said before, was based on this. For 3 years we've been steadily creating a platform, and I won't go into those now, but perhaps in question time I can, but particularly to capitalise on the power of community. And one of the key things that I've learned when I worked in developing countries, that I've worked in quite a few now, and lived there, is the community is the powerhouse for transformation, particularly towards equality. And the job of international agencies is never a top-down job of support and help. It's one of actually helping the local people help themselves, invariably. And I can give many examples of actually how this actually does work in terms of things which we did. Not only that, but also powered the possibility of programs which started within the local community and the strength of the local community, but expanded across the world as a result of that. And I'll mention also the impact of both inequality in developing countries on happiness and kindness, and the other side of this, which is you don't have to be rich to be very caring. The first thing is an African society that I discovered that could not remember an act of kindness. They'd been so ground down into poverty for so long, they couldn't even remember it. Counter to this, there's a beautiful story from June 2002 of the Maasai people in Kenya. They heard of the 9/11 attack in New York, and they decided to do something about it. So they brought down a group of their sacred cows, formal ceremonies and banners to the people of America, we give these cows to you. They donated the cows in support of the people who'd been killed in 9/11 in the United States. In other words, desperately poor, but happy within a community that made sense. They cared, and they even cared enough to donate money to the United States to help them at a time of trouble. The final thing I particularly note, though, about capital and its international thing, firstly is the level of control which exists and is highly concentrated. 147 companies, the CEOs of 147 companies who would fit in this room, control over 40% of the entire monetary value of all transnational corporations. They fit in this room. That is 0.00021% of the world population. And what happens to the rest of them is buried in the frameworks of their own actions and their own awards and so on. Climate change, as Trump in particular has demonstrated to us, is taken off the agenda. And again, back to the economics, I'm inspired by a quote from Kenneth Bolden some years ago now. Anyone who believes that exponential growth can go on forever within a finite world is either a madman or an economist. I'm not putting anything about the economists here, of course, but other economists in other words, Chicago and so on. But there's also the particular problem which is coming out because of this control in terms of our future and the sustainability of our future food. To give you just one example, again it may be familiar to Monsanto, now controls 87% of all the world's genetically engineered seeds, and these seeds cannot reproduce. They have to be bought every year. Now, you can imagine the risk that puts into an ecosystem. The top 10 seed companies control 73% of the global seed market. It's incredibly concentrated. Okay, now I was getting very close to finishing the book. I was literally doing the final versions or the final revisions on the chapter, and then Mr. Trump came along and got himself elected President of the United States against everybody's surprise. And this It's just 20 days ago, but look at what's happened in 20 days. Quite an extraordinary period of history. Alec Baldwin, of course, has a permanent job for the next 4 years at least, in imitating Mr. Trump. And Paul Hogan was actually interviewed last week and asked, do you have any jokes about Trump? And he said, you can't make jokes about him. He's won already. But he's the most powerful man in the world. Now, I'm not going to go into all the reasons he did get elected. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with this. And anything you don't know, I can certainly help you with, because I've been intimately studying the man for the last 2 weeks. But what's strange is the rest of the world watched in disbelief as a posturing, aggressive, habitually lying, self-centered billionaire businessman with zero international diplomatic or policy experience became the most powerful man in the world. Okay. That's not at all prejudiced, that's directly accurate. Partly because of the electoral college system, but also in particular because of the inequality and the people who'd lost their jobs in the manufacturing industries in the central states in particular, and the middle class particularly, who were starting to get afraid of what globalization was actually doing to them and needed to draw the boundaries tighter around them. What Trump mainly represents to me, I believe, is simply, not simply, a major symbol of a general fear that's developing in this context of globalization. In other words, I believe globalization is reaching towards a tipping point where change is going to happen. Again, like Frank, I can't predict exactly which direction it's going to go, but there's some pretty important indicators going on now. There is, of course, major opposition still in the United States to Trump. The only one of them, I'll pick out in case you didn't see this, was an action by an artist called Plastic Jesus, who built a 15-centimetre high concrete wall around the star of Donald Trump on the Walk of Fame in Hollywood. He put signs up on Spanish and English. It had a barbed wire fence over the top as a protest, and it became quite interesting worldwide to see this. I think it's rather clever. Trump business, of course, 140 companies in 25 countries, is already leading him into problems in terms of constitution. He's leader of the Free World Impact. As you probably realise, he was the single biggest market influence. He's not capable of writing or reading more than 144 characters at a time. But when he did actually produce 140 characters, when he was firstly, following the election, talking about Lockheed Martin, he wiped 3% or $2.25 billion off their market value. And when he did things such as change the climate change agenda, much of the same thing happened. The day of his inauguration, hundreds of billions of dollars were on the move, and if bond trading was included, it literally went up to $1 trillion moved because of Mr. Trump. Now that's pretty good power in terms of economic influence. Of course, he's immediately tackled climate change as being gets in the way in all sorts of different ways, and he's closed down the borders for people who believe will come from the Muslim faith. But the wider picture is the one I want to focus on, and then also particularly to see just how wrong Trump is in his approach of trying to reconstruct employment the way he is. We see in Brexit, we see with Marine Le Pen in France, we see even with some of the things happening in the Australian political system and other countries too, including the Netherlands, that already a similar kind of fear of what globalization is doing and not doing is leading to people closing their boundaries, closing their borders. Even Marine Le Pen is talking about leaving the EU, for example. But also what you see is a key lesson of general social failure. If you look at many of the kingdoms that have fallen, for example, the Egyptian and the old Egyptian kingdom, the Chow dynasty, the Hittites, Athens, Rome, British Empire, you find a similar story, and you find a very similar story if you look at companies that have also collapsed frequently. I'll give you one example. Kodak in 1962 employed 75,000 people, controlled 70% of the film market, and made $1 billion in US sales alone. In 2012, they went bankrupt. They kept wanting to do film, even though they developed the digital camera. Trump is returning demanding return, particularly manufacturing, from US companies relocated overseas. Now the problem, of course, is that he's not paying much attention to the way global capitalism actually does work, i.e. it goes to where the costs are cheapest. Already, companies are what they call reshoring, coming back to the United States. Companies such as General Electric, Walmart and Zentech, because the production technology advances that have been made that now make it a lot cheaper and not needing the same kind of labour costs. So, the companies left, for example, with 4,000 employees in the States, they come back with 121. There's many other stories, and particularly the complexity of Apple. Now it's totally woven into a worldwide system of supply, so that Apple, for example, employs worldwide only 100,000 people. But wider than that are the suppliers, which is 1.6 million people, only a few of which are in the United States. And there's other problems, such as the fact that they absolutely depend on rare earth, as well as 70 elements of the periodic table, 70, to make your iPhone. And of course, the rare earths are controlled by China, so immediately we have problems. But what I particularly want to focus on is the production systems that require no more human labour. Am I running out of time?
You're a bit five.
Okay, five. I've got some beautiful stories about robots, but I shall obviously have to condense them.
They'll come up in questions.
Yeah, they'll come up in questions, that's good. One robot which I particularly like is called Baxter. The latest humanoid robot from Rethink Robotics for $22,000 is now going through factories like a wildfire. Amazon is using robots almost completely now for all warehousing in its company. Not only that, the robots are now talking to each other, so that in fact if they find something wrong on the floor, like a bit of grease, they actually tell each other and they avoid it. They don't need people anymore. And of course robots are also moving not just from the manufacturing and the classifiable areas, but particularly into the service sectors now. As you would realise, the service sector, even in Australia now, I think it's about 80% of employment. But it's also being replaced. 25% in UK is predicted to be replaced of all business services within the next 2 decades. In the United States, it's predicted that something like 40% of all jobs will be replaced by production-based developments. And the one that I particularly like, it's also a major piece of work happening in China now, with a company called Wind Sun Decoration Design in Shanghai. They're using 3D printers to build 10 houses on a block of land in 24 hours. That's not bad for a printing press. I mean, it's better than the photocopying I used to do anyway. And there's a robot called Tigerstone paving robot that can lay a road at 4 times the speed of human workers. There's just so many examples. But Ross, another robot is taking over legal practice based on IBM. Medical practitioners are stitching up pigs by computer. They're replacing pharmacists. And the military, of course, as you can imagine, are predicting that in two decades, 25% of the combat will now be run by robots, not by people anymore, which makes it an awful lot easier. The best one I like, though, is the cyborg doppelganger. And there's a Japanese robot developer, Professor Hiroshi Ishiguro of Osaka, and what he's done is built a cyborg of himself. He was an artist, so he's built a beautiful face out of silicon plastic devices and so on. It smiles, it does all his own facial expressions, of which there's 100 programmed into the robot. The thing I like about him is he works at Osaka University and he sends his robot overseas to give his lectures. He sits at home with a computer and the internet. This could be our future, I hate to tell Frank as well. The point of what is emerging now, though, and this is the quote I basically used as a general theme of the book, what I was talking about today, is a quote from Ogden Nash: "The future is not what it used to be." So that what's happening is the development now, and this is something we'll have to talk about in conversation and discussion later, is the development of the concept of the universal basic income. Okay. Now there's enormous implications of what this represents in terms of social organisation and design, but it's really just out there. Just to give an example, and the people are talking about it as being prepared for a society of unemployment, not a society of employment. And the interesting thing is that there are many reasons why people will still need to find work even if it's unemployment. including particularly the meaning of what work actually means for people. Now, just in terms of, this is my final bit, just about the sort of ideas that are developing and where about universal basic income. Originally, there were small-scale schemes introduced through development assistance programs in Kenya, Uganda and India, which worked. Iran, however, interesting enough, was the first country to introduce it in 2010, based on oil reserves. Now, there's a town in Dauphin, Manitoba that was testing, even Richard Nixon, believe it or not, mentioned it at some stage before he got impeached. Switzerland held a referendum that you may well have read about last year, but only 25% supported it. That was partly because they worked out the cost was going to be at least double the current budget. But the trials are already being considered in Scotland by councils in Fife and Glasgow, the Netherlands cities of Utrecht, Tilburg, Nijmegen, Wageningen and Groningen, testing different models. Italy has started with the town of Livorno. Canadian province of Ontario is developing trials to be implemented, and were implemented, I should say, since 1st of January this year. And Y Combinator, a Silicon Valley incubator company, is sponsoring a similar test as what's happening in Finland, in Oakland, California. In other words, the movement is starting to happen. And people are looking particularly towards the future in terms of what it will imply with a technological future that basically eliminates work. Now, this is a transformation of a future that we have never really seriously thought about before, but the social implications, particularly, and I say this again quite strongly, what matters is not just adjusting the economic relationships, but adjusting the society so it is actually strong and more powered by doing this. And there are ways in which this can happen. So, again, my quote is, the future is not what it used to be.
That's a great point. Thanks very much. Thank you very much.